Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Lifestyle with Dr. Moby, another episode. Great show. And let's chat with our guest, Mr. Bart Sibrel, right, sir?
That's correct. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for coming to our show, and we welcome you all the way from Philippines, right?
Yeah, and I was just thinking during your beautiful opening of your program, how brave you are to have me on your show and open-minded you must be.
I love actually discovering new things about different type of people, and we have all kind of. We have people with hypnotism. We have people with a psychology background. Of course, we have some marijuana users. We have some drug users. It's not that we promote, but we want to listen to what they think of, and basically learn. It's all about learning.
That's
So,
right.
and I think today is going to be great episode. So definitely I give little intro, but you're the best one to. You're an award-winning filmmaker, writer, investigative journalist who has been producing TV shows and also documentaries, and you have worked with major networks, of course, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, TLC, USA, and BET, right?
That's
And you
correct.
have, as an actor, staged over 500 times. Wow, amazing, amazing career. And you've been published in Time Magazine, New York Times, Washington Post, USA Today, and you got American Motion Picture Society for best cinema, best editing, top 10 directors, right? Wow, what an amazing career you have. So tell me a little bit about, I think we talked a little bit before the show about one of your fascinating aspect or movie, which projects you had was moon landings. So why why moon landing? Why not Mars landing? Why not? I mean, that'll be the next probably. So why,
Yeah, I
why
mean
was
that's a really good question. I didn't intend on making a movie or two about the moon landings. That wasn't my objective, my goal. My
Mhm.
real goal is to be a feature filmmaker, and God willing, I will be making my first feature film this year. I've been a professional filmmaker for almost 40 years, doing documentaries, TV commercials, music videos, things like that.
Mhm.
And I worked for NBC News for 2 years. And during that time, I met a gentleman who worked for NASA with very high security clearance for 6 years during the Apollo moon program. And he told me that he read a memo from the chief rocket designer, Werner von Braun, from him to the Pentagon, warning them not to try to go to the moon with primitive 1960s technology. He said if they did, they had a 99.99% chance of killing the crew on national TV. He said there's no way we're going to make it on the first attempt. In fact, in the entire history of aviation, not a single vehicle ever got off the ground on the first attempt. Not the Wright brothers kite with the motor, and not the 747, which was built with 10 years better technology after millions of aircraft have already been built. It took 168 attempts to get off the ground. But for some reason, for the first time in aviation history, the most complicated mission ever done worked the very first time. And that, when NASA's all computer power combined had 1 millionth the computing power of a cell phone. So when a guy who worked there during the Apollo program for 6 years tells an NBC reporter, hey, by the way, they did not go to the moon, I'm like, that's kind of weird, because I had on my bedroom wall for 10 years a shrine, literal shrine to men on the moon. I had like 20 pictures up on my wall in one area, covering a whole wall for 10 years about the moon landing being how great it was. But like you said at the very beginning, you have to keep an open mind. The ancient texts say that pride prevents you from seeing the truth. And what is pride? Pride is simply the unwillingness to be wrong. I showed, which we'll talk about, four conclusive proofs that the moon missions were indeed and unfortunately falsified to a professor at a university teaching aerospace. And he said There was nothing I could show him that would make him recant the glorious moon landings. And I said, well, what about if you saw Neil Armstrong on national TV tearfully confessing the moon missions were fake? He said, I still think he walked on the moon anyway. I mean, that's pretty remarkable, isn't it? And so all you have to do is keep an open mind. And so I did. And this gentleman says we didn't go. I started looking into it, and I was given $1 million by someone who builds rockets for NASA who knows the moon missions were fake. I mean, you can prove that they're fake with simple deductive reasoning because today, with NASA's best technology, 50 years better technology than in 1969 when they claimed they went on the moon on the first attempt. Today, they can only send a human being 250 miles into outer space. That's as far as they can go. And yet, the moon is 1,000 times farther. So, what they're saying is with 1 millionth the computing power of a cell phone 50 years ago, they had 1,000 times greater space traveling technology than they do today with 5 decades better technology. So, what that means is they're claiming that there was greater technology in the past than is in the future. But wait a minute, that's a scientific impossibility. That's a historic possibility. You can't have greater technology in the past than in the future, which means that technology in the past did not exist. It was a bluff, like in poker. So I made a movie called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. I was initially producing it with the theory it might be true that they faked the moon mission. Now, when someone who worked there for 6 years tells you it was fake, you would think I would accept that. I didn't. And when a millionaire who builds rockets for NASA tells you it's fake, I still said, well, maybe. So, 7 year project that cost $1 million, 3.5 years into it, I'm exhaustingly going through the archives, and someone at NASA gives me an unedited reel of behind the scenes classified footage from the first mission to the moon. I pop in the tape. Mind you, these are huge broadcast videotapes. It was Betacam SP back then. I pop it in. The first thing I see on the screen is don't show to the public. And I'm like, oh, this should be pretty good. Well, I hit fast forward like I usually do to save time. And instead of seeing a bunch of shots go by, I see the same shot for an hour. A little blue ball Earth with black around it that's supposed to be the Earth floating in space. Well, the lights come up and it's a 1 foot model. The problem is this is dated 2 days into the flight, and this is the crew of Apollo 11 claiming to have the window at the glass of the spacecraft looking back at the little blue Earth floating in space. The lights come up. It's a 1 foot model of the Earth, and we also have a track of audio from the CIA telling them how to fake a radio delay as if they're beyond Earth orbit, when in fact they were in Earth orbit the entire time for 8 days. And what a surprise, 50 years later, they still cannot leave Earth orbit. That's why they're mannequins orbiting the moon and the Artemis project. So 50 years ago, we could drive cars and play golf on the moon. But for some reason today, we can only, send mannequins to orbit the moon. If you go to mylastname.com, Sibrel.com,
Hmm.
you'll see clips for free. My new book, Moon Man, The True Story of a Filmmaker on the CIA Hit List, is available in audio. I read it, or Kindle or print at Sibrel.com, and it's interactive. There's like a chapter, then a video link, a chapter and a video link. You can see those links for free. Go to Sibrel.com, click on the top left button, Moon Man Video Links, and one of the links is a NASA employee, Kelly Smith, saying the following word for word on camera: the technology necessary to leave Earth orbit and go to the moon has yet to be invented. That's why there's mannequins on board the current spacecraft, you see? And we have classified footage of them faking part of the mission. We have shadows. I can share my screen and we can prove right now that the moon missions are fake with one photograph. Let's do it. Let's just share the screen. I'm going to
Yeah.
share the screen right now. And you see this picture here, don't you?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. I thought I was sharing the screen. Good thing we can edit here. Let me make sure I've got it here. Maybe I didn't click it. Share. How about now?
Yeah, I see now.
Okay. So let me just enlarge this a little bit. Where's my enlarger button for this one? That's up
On the
here.
top. Yeah.
There we go. Okay. So to the right here is a photograph from the alleged last mission to the moon. So we know they're all fake, right?
Mhm.
This is a shadow of an astronaut. As you can see, it's going in the 12 o'clock direction. Here's a shadow from a rock about 5 feet away, going in the
Mhm.
9 o'clock position. Well, the sun is a million times bigger than the Earth. It's 93 million miles away. It's going to cast shadows in the same direction over an entire continent or moon. To the left here are what shadows look like in real sunlight. Here's a telephone pole shadow here. Here's another telephone pole shadow here. They're about 5 feet apart, just like over here. And the shadows are always parallel. It's impossible for shadows to intersect that are lit by the sun. Impossible. So if
Yeah.
two objects are that are 5 feet away have their shadows intersecting at 90 degrees, take it from a filmmaker and take it from logic to the left here, that's an electrical light. So if it's electrical light, that means they're on Earth. That means the moon landings are fake. So you only need one picture to prove that the moon missions are fake. So we have the shadows intersecting at 90 degrees when they should be parallel. We have classified footage, which I can show you as well through screen sharing. And did I stop just there?
Yeah.
Okay, I stopped. So back, we're back. You're back to me now, right?
Hmm.
Okay, so we have shadows intersecting at 90 degrees that prove it. We have classified footage of a 1 foot model. I have that queued up to show you. We have the logic that you can't have greater technology in the past and in the future, which is what they're claiming. And it gets even better, or dare I say worse. Part of the thing that came out after I produced A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, that is now in my book, Moon Man, the true story of a filmmaker on the CIA hit list, is the fact that we have a deathbed confession from an eyewitness of the moon landing fraud. His name was Cyrus Eugene Akers, and I can show you his picture as well. He was the chief of security. In fact, we can go ahead and do that. Share screen. There we go. This is a picture of Cyrus Eugene Akers.
Hmm.
He was the chief of security at Cannon Air Force Base in 1968. Every branch of the military has their special ops intelligence division. The Marines do, the Navy does, the Army does, and so does the Air Force. And guess where it's headquartered? It's headquartered at this guy's base at Cannon Air Force Base in Clovis, New Mexico. On his deathbed, okay, he confessed not only to eyewitnessing the faking of the moon landing fraud, he confessed to something worse than that. And this isn't even in my book. I just now talking about it because his son, who was dying of cancer, didn't want to deal with the fallout from it. He has now passed away, so I can share it. This man, Cyrus Eugene Akers, confessed he murdered a coworker as part of his duties as the chief of security at Cannon Air Force Base because his friend, his coworker, was going to come forward and tell the public that they faked the moon landing at his Air Force Base a year in advance because he thought it was morally wrong. Cyrus Eugene Akers confessed as he was dying to get it off his chest, he murdered this person. And then he went on to say the reason why he murdered him was to cover up the faking of the moon landing, which was filmed at his base, Cannon Air Force Base. He personally stood beside President Johnson, who was there for the first 3 days of filming. President Johnson gave him a list of 15 VIP eyewitnesses who were allowed in to observe. He gave us that list. I published it in my book. Some of those people are still alive today. So we have shadows intersecting that should be parallel. We have classified footage of fake photography showing they never left Earth orbit. We have the logic that you can't have greater technology in the past than in the future. And now we have an eyewitness coming forward. 4 times the evidence that is necessary. Now, whoever killed Kennedy, he's still dead. Whoever did 9/11, they're still dead. Unlike those two events, this is a positive lie. You see, this is why it's so hard for people to accept that the moon missions were fake because it made them feel good. Tell a child there's no Santa Claus and see what happens. I remember What happened
Yeah.
when I found out? I cried and cried and cried all night. Imagine a, a child is sucking on a piece of candy. You take it away and you give him a turd instead. This is what will happen if the American public finds out that the moon missions were fake. They'll be enraged. Well, my son, I mean, the son of this guy, not my son, the son of Cyrus Eugene Akers, I contacted him to confirm all this information about his father. Days later, his house was broken into. Everything about his father was confiscated. And a couple of days later, government agents showed up and said if he ever spoke to me again, they would kill him and his family. This was less than 2 years ago because the government is very concerned that the truth will come out. And not just because they faked the moon landing, because they committed multiple murders to cover it up. These aren't my opinions. I have two people who work at NASA who told me it was fake. It's their opinion, not mine. We have an eyewitness who told me it was fake. He saw them filming the faking of it, right? I've interviewed former astronauts, Apollo astronauts, widows, and children who told me after 7 hours of interviews that their husband and father, who was going to be the first man to walk on the moon, was murdered by the CIA because he would not cooperate. Not my opinion, the opinion of the dead man's relatives. Okay. This is in the book, and this is why the government is so concerned that the truth comes out. Because not only will the American public find out a third of our labor, a third of our income robbed to fake the moon landing, they also use that money to hire CIA agents to murder our neighbors and friends who are trying to expose their crimes. This is why they're so concerned. And there's all these documentaries to reassure the public that the moon missions were real. Don't listen to Bart Sibrel. Now, if I went around saying Mickey Mouse was the first president instead of George Washington, do you think there'd be 100 documentaries online to reassure us? If something needs to be supported like that, then it's fragile to begin with. You see, and when I accidentally leave a microphone on an Apollo astronaut after I show him fake footage of the first moon mission, and he literally assaults me, he's so angry, and we accidentally forget to turn off the recorder on the camera, and we accidentally hear the private conversations in his house. I have them queued up. You can hear it for yourself. He is talking about calling the CIA to have me assassinated. Now, if they really went to the moon and I'm some silly person who thinks it was done in a TV studio, why would the CIA care? Why would he care? You see? So this is the state of the world. We have the world government that claims to be, the beacon of light and truth for the world being exactly the opposite and faking the greatest event in human history, right? And using people's money to deceive them and to murder anyone who comes forward about the truth.
Wow, interesting, very interesting. I never thought this angle, and I never looked. I know. I mean, I heard about it, but I know. But maybe it is like if you don't fake it, you don't make it.
Well, the CIA code name for the project of the faking of the moon mission was actually President Johnson's idea. He called it Project Slam Dunk because if they tried to go on the first time, they would definitely kill the crew. So the only way to guarantee a successful mission was to fake it, which meant it was easy. It's easy to go to the moon when you fake it. Therefore, it's a slam dunk. And that's what it was called, Operation Slam Dunk. And this is why Johnson didn't run for reelection when he was eligible. No president in modern history has ever turned down running for reelection when he was eligible, except Johnson, because he knew the faking of the moon mission would be in the next term. And who knew you could get away with that? What if you got caught? Didn't want to have anything to do with it. And that's why Nixon doesn't show up for the launch. Can you imagine? You're president of the United States, the whole world is watching, going to the moon is in your country, and you don't show up for the launch. He didn't want a picture of him smiling and shaking Neil Armstrong's hand and for the whole thing to unravel and the fraud to come out. And he didn't want a picture of him. That's why he didn't. After they faked it and got away with it, he shows up for the second launch. Isn't that interesting? So the idea that it's Republican, Democrat, a war between the two, that's just a lie. They want us going after each other rather than them at the top. Republican Nixon gave it the thumbs up, and blue Democrat, approved it and was there supervising the filming of it. So both parties faked the moon landing, and both parties are covering it up because they're afraid it will usher in government reforms and all the criminals will be booted out if the public found out what they really did.
Well, that's very interesting. I think you have a valid point. It's open for discussion. Yeah, what really is intriguing is, it took about now 50 plus years, right? And then there is never a single, attempt again. Even still, as we know, it's not going to happen for next 4 years, right?
Yeah, I mean, they've said they're going to, quote, return to the moon 10 times over the last 50 years, and they've never done it a single time. NASA can't even put a telescope into Earth orbit on schedule, 10 years behind schedule. In fact, NASA has never kept a schedule in their entire history except going to the moon, the most complicated mission of all time. They're ahead of schedule, right? They said in 2014 they're going to have humans orbiting the moon in 2018. They're 200% behind schedule, and they only have mannequins orbiting the moon, not people. They can't even do that. You see, Elon Musk wanted to land a rocket vertically with 5 decades better technology, with 6 computers surrounding the rocket, each millions of times faster than all of the computers at NASA combined during the 60s. And in trying to land a rocket vertically the first time, it blew up. Elon
Yeah.
Musk tried the second time, it blew up. The third time, it blew up. The fourth time, it blew up. It took him 5 attempts to land a rocket vertically with millions of times greater computer power than in 1969. So, how did they land a rocket vertically 6 times in a row on the moon with 1/10 millionth the computing power on the first attempt? You see, that doesn't make any sense. In fact, they just said, this is less than 4 weeks ago, in order to go to the moon, we're going to have to make 18 fuel trips first to the space station, and then from there, we'll have enough fuel to go to the moon. They didn't make 18 fuel trips. We uncovered a document. Mind you, we have a millionaire backing us, and some of the documents we bought cost $10,000 from the estates of dead Apollo astronauts. We bought them from their widows. Von Braun originally said the following numbers are mathematically irrefutable. In order to go to the moon in one rocket with all the fuel, it's going to have to weigh 800,000 tons, and something like that just could not be built. And the Saturn V only weighed 2,500 tons, not 800,000 tons, a
Mhm.
difference of 30,000%. So that's why they're having to make 18 fuel trips in order to put men on the moon the second time, but somehow didn't have to do that the first time. You see? And the longer it goes on where they can't repeat something so easy, the more preposterous it seems. I mean, when they blew up the atomic bomb in 1945, just 10 years later, atomic bombs were 1,000 times more powerful. So if they could go to the moon on the first attempt with 1 millionth the computing power of a cell phone, we would have been on Mars 10 years later. We'd be in another solar system by now, and there'd be bases all over the moon by multiple countries. And the country that claimed to do it 50 years ago doesn't even have one base there now. I mean, come on. If it weren't for people's emotional attachment to the glory or the patriotism of putting men on the moon, they would see it for the lie that it really is.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, it definitely has a few things which really eye-opening. Now, the one thing is which is interesting, which I see, which I have seen with regarding technology. So there are, in my opinion, there are parts of I don't know, the government or whatever. They have some of the technology they don't share with common, entities. Okay, the reason for whatever reason. So they have these really advanced technology, which I don't know for some reason. So give you example of Blackbird, right? The powerful plane, right? So if you look at that in 1960s or whatever 70s, it could do 5 times the speed of sound or something. So, and now we don't have anything after that. So,
Well, because they're not necessary. With spy satellites, you don't need spy planes anymore. You're talking about the SR-71
yeah.
aircraft. Yeah, that could fly, like at 50,000 feet or something like that. Yeah, but the I think it's 100,000 feet actually. But yeah, they don't need it anymore. They have spy
No, no, what
satellites.
I'm saying is that's true. Need is one thing, but the technology was there, you know. So
Yeah, but
even, yeah, even
yeah,
in that time, the technology in that SR-71 was so advanced that it could take a picture of the car on the road.
yeah,
And
it was remarkable.
yeah, yeah. So
And
what confuses me is that you are at top of technology. You can do all this. Take the picture of the car, which is 70,000 below you, and not lose track of it. And what happened to that technology? So now we don't even have technology. After that, there's a big lapse of technology somehow transfer to there was nothing after. So you thought, if you can take picture from 70,000 feet of a small plate of the car, what happened now? It should have been like really amazing, you know.
well, it is. And they have satellites that can do that,
Mm,
and they do very well. Uh, the issue really is Orwell's quote. Orwell said, "Whoever controls the past controls the future." So whoever controls the past, which is the federal government, the past being the moon landings are real when they're not, those same criminals will control our future. Meaning, unless the moon landing fraud comes out, either fully exposed or admitted to, those
mm,
same criminal entities will continue running our country and the world to our own demise, right?
mm.
So there is not a, believe me, I'm a journalist. I worked at NBC, ABC, had media credentials, went to NASA, and they threw me out with an appointment with media credentials simply for asking somebody whether they walked on the moon or not, right? And we don't have a free press, not when contrary opinions are taken down. There's a certain thing that's been going on for the last 3 years. And the inventor of the medicine that everyone is taking, even though they're not sick, right? Taking medicine when you're not sick, that's kind of weird. The inventor of that medicine, right? He has a certain opinion about it. Number one, there's no reason to take it. And number two, it's not good for you. He invented it. You put him on any major platform, they take him down. Now, wait a minute. He's the inventor of the technology. You would think every news organization in the world would want to interview him about this medicine that everyone in the world is taking. They take him down if he speaks the truth. Well, what does that leave you? If they're taking down the truth, then what's up there is lies, you see? So that's the world that we live in. We live in a world run by people who are liars and murderers and thieves because taking money from the taxpayers and not giving them the moon landing is stealing their money. And they murdered people to cover it up. The relatives of dead Apollo astronauts say so themselves, and we have Cyrus Eugene Akers saying so himself. He personally murdered somebody to cover up the moon landing fraud, and his salary was paid by you and me, right?
Wow,
So
that's
if the truth about the moon landing fraud doesn't come out, these same criminals are going to be ruining our lives until the end of time. And the faking of the moon landing is just a perfect example of their sheer arrogance in deceiving the people that are supposed to be under their care. And they're supposed to be our servants, right? But lately you have to ask permission to open your business, ask permission to go to church, ask permission to go to the beach. Well, wait a minute. If I'm asking permission from another person, then I'm a slave and they're my master, right? Somehow they went from being our servants to our masters. How is it that a former head, a former president of a pharmaceutical company can become the director of the Food and Drug Administration approving pharmaceutical drugs? That should be illegal. We should be telling our servants that that's illegal. You should not do that. And if you do, we're going to throw you in jail. We should be telling them that. But they're telling us that that is okay. You see, somehow it got flipped upside down. The people being our servants are our masters now, and they're corrupt and they're running the show. They're faking moon landings. We have have on his deathbed Robert McNamara, who was defense secretary during the Vietnam War. The public was against the war, and they said, look, we need to get public support. We need something like Pearl Harbor to enrage people. Because before Pearl Harbor, 90% of Americans were against entering World War II. After Pearl Harbor, one day later, 90% are for it to get even. They said, we need something like that. So then they staged an event called the Gulf of Tonkin, the alleged attack by a North Vietnamese ship on American ships. Robert McNamara, defense secretary at the time, admitted before he died they just made that up. He and the CIA made that up. That led to the death of 3 million people, including 58,220 Americans. So I think if they're willing to kill 58,000 of their own people without reason, I think they're willing to fake an image on television when there's no independent press coverage to verify whether it's from the moon or not, right? How would you know? You just got to take their word for it. It was so easy to fake, people don't realize it, and everyone was predisposed to believing it. I had pictures of the moon landing up on my wall for years, believing it was real. I never looked at the pictures critically, and the moment I did, boom, the fake backdrop suddenly materialized. They were there all along. I just didn't have an open mind to them.
So, did they come up with the explanation to your criticism of the shadow? Did they try to explain?
No, they did not. In fact, recently, someone saw my movie, If Anything Happened on the Way to the Moon, that you can see for free at Sibrel.com, a curator of a museum in the Netherlands. And there was a moon rock there, hermetically sealed. Neil Armstrong said out of his own mouth, he personally picked up this rock off the surface of the moon and personally gave it to the Prime Minister of the Netherlands. They received it. They sealed in this box. It's been there for 50 years. The box gets open. The rock is put under a microscope. It's a fake. It's a piece of petrified wood. So it comes out the moon rocks are fake. Well, what about the moon missions? You see? And then the classified footage that I uncovered, which I can show you if you want me to, even my greatest critics admit this is the crew of Apollo 11 faking being halfway to the moon from Earth orbit. They say, well, they're just rehearsing. I'm like, well, why not rehearse with the real Earth out the window? Why do you need a fake model? Right? And then it's dated 2 days into the flight by NASA's own atomic clock, at which time they're supposed to be halfway to the moon. And my critics admitted that they're still in Earth orbit. I showed the footage to the news director at NBC. He turned pale white, collapsed in his chair, put his hand over his mouth, and exclaimed, oh my God, this proves they never left Earth orbit. I said, yeah, what are we going to do? He said, I will not broadcast this. It will cause a civil war. I will not go down in history as the man who caused a civil war. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. You're saying that if we show and expose the corruption of the federal government, it will bring down the corrupt federal government? Isn't that what's supposed to happen? You see, 10 years go by, another news director at NBC sees the same footage, says the same thing. This absolutely proves they never left Earth orbit. And of course, 50 years later, they still can't leave Earth orbit. That's why mannequins are orbiting the moon today. He said, we're going to pay you exclusive rights. We're going to broadcast this nationwide on NBC News as a special. They fly me to New York, put me up in a fancy hotel, interview me. They said this is going to be breaking news unlike anything they've ever broadcast. They canceled the program. I asked the producer, why did you spend all this money and cancel it? He says, well, we got a threatening call from the United States government. So
Um,
you see that? And if you want to see the footage, I can show it to you. Or you can just go to Sibrel.com and see it for yourself in the film A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon.
okay, sure, you can show.
Okay. So I'm going to do present, share screen, share screen, share screen, and then the final button I missed the first time. So here we go. This is the footage, and I guess I'll turn maybe my speaker a little bit or my microphone toward the speaker in case. Can you pull the line quality audio of this, or do you need my microphone on the speaker?
No, yeah, no, I can change it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So basically, this is allegedly the Earth in space, right? And they footage. This is really the circular window spacecraft, you see, with part of the Earth outside of it in Earth orbit. Now, the first part you're going to hear is the audio of the CIA. You're going to hear NASA say, hey, the TV picture looks great. Then there's going to be exactly 4 seconds of dead air, because if they answer too quickly, it gives away the fact they're only 200 miles away in Earth orbit. So they have to fake a radio delay as if they're halfway to the moon. So the CIA counts off 1, 2, 3, 4 seconds, and then you hear the CIA say, talk. And then Neil Armstrong speaks. Take a look and a listen.
Hello, Apollo 11. Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over.
Okay, so according to NASA, there's only 2 people on the track, NASA and the astronauts, but there's not. There's a third track of audio telling them talk only after 4 seconds have gone by. Now, here's the part they intended to be broadcast to the public. Mind you, this is supposed to be the Earth in space, when in fact it's the circular window of the spacecraft. They even insert a little crescent piece of black material here to make it look like the Terminator line between night and day. So listen as they lie and claim they're 130,000 miles away from the Earth.
All right, Houston, Apollo 11. Calling in from about 130,000 miles out.
Okay, except they're not 130,000 miles out, as you will see from this clip. Okay, we just showed you that this here, right, is supposed to be the Earth floating in space halfway to the moon with the lens against the glass, when in fact the lens at the back of the spacecraft, because here's the same image here, the same proportion of allegedly the Earth floating in space. And now let's take a look at it. This is the unedited version they never showed to the public. What you're seeing in the top left is a work light that they use to show camera controls, but to keep the rest of the walls of the spacecraft dark. And then here they are, they're about to remove part of the crescent insert and the special effect from around the window. You see, that's a 1-foot model of the Earth, either that or some giant is in outer space, right? And then you'll see the lights come up when they're setting up for an interior, and you see the real location of the camera and the very bright and near Earth outside of the window. So this is them faking being halfway to the moon when they're really in Earth orbit, and what a surprise, they cannot leave Earth orbit later, 50 years later. Now here's the recording, while we've got things queued up, of the wireless microphone being left on an Apollo astronaut inside accidentally, and him discussing with his son, calling the CIA to have me assassinated.
Want to call the CIA? Have them waxed?
Let me turn up that audio so you can hear it better.
Report, I hope. Want to call the CIA? Have them waxed?
Want to call the CIA and have them whacked. Okay, so they're talking about me. I just showed the Apollo astronaut. In fact, I'll stop screen sharing here. So back to me. So that's me they're talking about. They're talking about calling the CIA to have me killed because I just showed the Apollo astronaut the fake footage that I just showed you. It turned him beet red. He got angry. Where did you get this footage? And he literally assaults me. He kicks me from behind, and in the commotion, we left the wireless microphone on him. And in the commotion, my camera person forgot to hit stop recording. So while he's in his house with the doors closed and the camera's in the back seat of the rental car still recording the guy's driveway, we hear him talking about calling the CIA to have me assassinated, which would not be necessary if they really went to the moon. So there you go. And then, of course, as I mentioned, government agents threatened my source less than 2 years ago with death if he ever spoke to me again. Why would that be necessary if they really went to the moon, when in fact his father gave a deathbed confession that he eyewitnessed the faking of the moon landing at Cannon Air Force Base in Clovis, New Mexico in 1968, which he supervised and murdered a coworker to keep a secret. That's what he confessed. He gave us a list of 15 people who were there at the time. We published it in the book. Some of those people are still alive. This is our government. This is our world. They faked the greatest accomplishment of mankind, and Nixon had the audacity to say, when he knew it was fake, that putting a man on the moon was the greatest event since creation. Imagine that. Just like they said of the Titanic, the ship that God himself could not sink. Look what happened there. So this is the irony of it all. The greatest accomplishment of mankind done by the alleged hero of the world, the United States, is a complete fraud. If that doesn't show the fallen state of mankind, I don't know what does.
Well, that's very sad, if it's true. So, people can check out your website and kind of know more about it, right? And thank you for coming and giving your perspective. We really, honor your thoughts, and we really would like people to check you out and kind of try to look with open minds and see
Yeah, and
everything.
I want to thank you for your open mind and your courage to have me on the program. And if you could just link my website and the link of your video
Sure.
below, it's just my last name.com, Sibrel.com. I used to think the moon missions are real. I had an open mind, and now you have to face facts. And the worst fact is these criminals are still in power. So that's dangerous. So the sooner people know about the moon landing fraud, the sooner they can change the way these fraudulent governments operate and try to do it in a more noble and honest way in the future. Just go to Sibrel.com.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming and take care and good night. Thank you.
Sure, take care.